Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the chattering teacup.
Hello.
And here with us from warm and palmy Florida, Natalie Palma. Hello Natalie and welcome at Book Lovers Companion.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. It is our pleasure to talk to you. And let's dive right in, shall we? Okay. You've written so far 2 books in a series. The Medicine Law Cozy Mysteries, and book 2 came out only last year. It's called Dollars to Donuts to Dead. So your private investigator, Medicine. She didn't start as a private investigator. She started as a police officer. So what can you tell us about Medicine?
So Madison served on the force for several years, and she has had an injury. She was actually shot in the shoulder, and the story doesn't really explain the whole situation of what happened to her, but she was removed from the force. And now she was kind of looking for a job, and she ended up becoming a private investigator. And she feels she's kind of been ripped away from the world that she loved, but she still has these skills and she's able to help people with. So that's what she's kind of turned to private investigating.
This begs the question that in books and films, it often happens that police officers, whatever the reason, stop being officers and turn to start private investigation. So how often do you think does it really happen? Is it very common?
Yeah, I actually think it is pretty common because, to be a police officer, in this case, she was a homicide detective. It really is a very daunting, difficult job psychologically and physically. I actually have a friend who served as a homicide detective for many years and retired early because it's a very taxing job. It's and it's something that you really have to be able to devote your whole life to, and it's so many hours. And for a lot of people, things happen in their lives, and they get pulled out of these jobs that they love, and they still want to dedicate their skills to the betterment of other people.
And we not only have Medicine because she is one part of, let's call it, dynamic duo, and her partner is Rick. But in the second book, she has to
work with someone else.
Yeah, a new sidekick. That's what I would call her, Daphne.
For the time being.
For the time being, yes. Because I know we don't give away any spoilers, but Rick doesn't die, so dear listeners, don't worry about it. But he's in hospital, very serious. Things happen to him, and Madison has to work with a new partner. So tell us a little bit about the story itself, because it was quite intriguing. We have murder, we have art theft. Where did it come from? How did it happen, this book?
Basically, a lot of it is been inspired by real art thefts. And in this case, without giving too much away, something was stolen. And it's a key to why so many people have been murdered or something else has happened to them, without giving too much away. With regard to Daphne is what a real private detective really is. I have another friend who's a private detective, and I would say they primarily live on the internet. They're the people who do the background checks. They're the people who, research insurance fraud. So much of that can be done online now. And there are so many different systems. So I wanted Daphne to be that side of the business. The people that we originally think of as private investigators who go on the field and they go looking for clues, that is the 10% of real private detective work. I actually have a friend who's a private detective, and he used to be in the Army. And what he does is he goes and shadows people. So he'll go to like a grocery store and he'll put things in the basket and he'll be shopping while looking for someone who's, say, doing insurance fraud, or someone who maybe is being unfaithful to their they're in the wrong side of town, and they're going to get some food and they're going to go to whoever they're cheating on their spouse with. So that kind of private detective work is very, very small. Most of it is online. So I thought that bringing Daphne and Madison together would kind of be bridging the world of what we think private investigation is and what it really is, and kind of putting them together.
And the art theft. You just said it's is it really very common these days, art theft?
Well, actually, art theft is more common than you think. But in this particular story, it was set in the past. And without giving too much away of this particular art theft, it was done in broad daylight on the day that it was in a show. And there were security guards and there was people and because the artwork was so small and portable, which for the artist, they wanted it that way so that they could go and draw in public and actually did show the precision and the artistry that it could be so small and so detailed. And really, it's very evocative piece. And, if it's portable, people will figure out a way to take it.
It's an easy one. You can't take the huge ones and just walk out with them. I mean, of course.
It can be done, but it's harder.
It can be done. It's harder, definitely harder.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, Madison's background, not just her working for the police before she started at the agency, but also her family background. I mean, the place she lives.
Yeah.
I mean, well,
it was a hotel.
Yes, but I got the impression when I read it that it felt a little bit like living in a sort of Halloween.
I think that's how they advertised it.
Yeah.
It was done on purpose.
Yeah. On a permanent basis. So it's always Halloween when you live there. Something like that. And I mean, it's strange.
Yeah. Well, if so Madison grew up in Kissimmee, and anyone who's grown up in Kissimmee, you grow up in the shadow of all the theme parks. Because you're so close, it's actually one of the places that it's a good bargain area. You should get to the theme parks, you get to the beaches in a relatively small amount of time. And so you're always living in that shadow. And it's actually a really fun shadow. But I grew up in that area and it was really cool because there would be all these very unique ideas because they were inspired by the theme parks, but they didn't have the theme park budgets. So they would say, like, how can I bring the theme park to me? So I thought of the idea of having kind of Madison is a beneficiary. Her parents passed away and they had kind of like an Addams Family kind of house that they were going to do a bed and breakfast. And then they passed away before they saw their dream come true. And so she's living in it and kind of fixing it and putting her own spin on it. And it's a weird place for her to live, but she loves it. It keeps people away that she doesn't want to,
it's a bonus.
People are salesmen and
True, absolutely true. And she also lives under the paw, and it also begs the question, the name of the cat, Ripley. So my question would be, is this Ripley named after Patricia Highsmith Ripley or the Sigourney Weaver Ripley?
Sigourney Weaver. And actually, it's so funny because I didn't know about Patricia Highsmith's Ripley until I named my cat. So basically what happened is my poor kitty, I'm the third owner, and they were kind of tragic situations where people had passed away, and she's a ragdoll cat, which is supposed to be a very docile cat. My sister had one, so I was like, I want to, please let me have this cat. And everybody's like, well, and the family's like, well, we don't want it. You can have it. I literally heard it was a rag doll from across the room. My mother-in-law had announced it to my husband, and I said, we're taking that cat, and so it was so funny because, that was not what he wanted, but it was funny because she is a sassy cat, and rag dolls are supposed to be very docile. So my sister had one she could put around her neck like a boa. It was just like this. Oh, it's like, I love you. Whatever you want me to do, sit on your lap. You can move it around the house, and it was just like this loving ball of fur. And she is a tiny dictator. I mean, she bosses me around. Oh my goodness! And she's got to be fed at a certain time. Her litter box has to be clean at a certain time. She wants me to go to bed at a certain time. Yeah, she pushes me around. And she's so cute. You're just like, okay, what do you want? What do you want?
That's how they manage to get everything they want.
That's why that's why we call ourselves staff.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And your books, the subtitle is called Cozy Crime, more or less. I mean, more or less, sorry to say that, but it calls it. So what are the criteria for a book to be labeled as cozy crime?
There are some books that call themselves cozy crime, and others are just labeled by the marketers. Is there a difference?
Well, I kind of think that it's actually something I've thought about removing from my book. I'm kind of torn because it's inspired by cozy. I think Angela Lansbury, and I think of there's so many good cozy mysteries that are out there. But I really sort of break the rules of cozies. So a cozy is a kind of a crime that is usually someone you don't really care about. Okay, so it's not something and it's really kind of toned down. So it's not something that is too visceral, too violent, always occurs off stage. And it usually is a amateur. So on that one, I kind of break the rule there. And it's funny because people say the spirit of it and the feeling of it is a cozy. And then some people say, well, I break that rule. So, you label it what you label it. And so I might be an illegal cozy. Might be breaking the rules.
Oh, that's great. And because you just said, it's private or it's an amateur, but usually cozies are not that harmless. We call them cozy, and yet when you read a book,
I think
it's rather gruesome.
I think the crimes are not that different, but they're just only mentioned on the side. It's not that they're the way they're committed is shown very detailed.
Yeah, true.
And usually they're more bodies than in others, but I know.
Yeah, you don't have that many bodies.
No, I don't have that many.
They're lacking.
But there's more than
I
one.
guess I could have more. Yeah.
Because I come to think of it, I mean, usually in every chapter.
Oh yeah, somebody else. Well, that's usually how the mystery solver discovers that that's not the person I thought did it, because they show up dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, okay, cross them off the list.
Yeah.
Who's the last one standing?
Yeah. Who's going to survive this cozy crime? It was fun. It was a fun read, actually.
Oh,
and what I found also interesting was this dynamic they had, which was also, I think, a little bit unusual with the police, because Madison's former colleague and now friend, I would say, Sophia, she plays also a vital part in your story, and they're not cross with each other.
She was a protege, wasn't she?
Yeah, but but sometimes that does change a little bit when people leave the force and become private investigators. It was refreshing in your book to see they are not constantly arguing and so on.
Yeah, I love that in different books, but I tried to make the conflict more outer than inner, because I do think that people work together very well. And Sophia can offer what she can offer, but again, she is bound by the fact that Madison is kind of a civilian, so she's limited. She wants to say more, but she can't. She's limited by the differences in their roles.
Yep.
They're no longer colleagues. Yep. She could share what she could share to a journalist, but that's kind of where her limits are. She can't share all that she wants to.
And you mentioned it before. You have friends who work in the force, and you have friends who work in the private sector. And how often did you call them to get your facts straight?
A lot. I actually, it's funny how much because I write it and then I rewrite it. And it's funny because you can get I'm working on a short story right now, and I had it was really cute description of how I discovered a toe. And it's like, well, that's not how they would handle the evidence. So, in case anyone's wondering, if you find a toe just sitting somewhere, a dismembered toe, they don't put it in a bag. They would put it actually in a paper bag.
Yep.
Take pictures and everything. And then they might, if it was floating in water, take a sample of that water. I had it like they were putting it in like a like a goldfish, that from a fair. And that is not how they do it. It was very evocative to me, but it was not, not procedure. So I got corrected on that.
I wonder about why you mentioned the word cute and then finding toe in one sentence. Interesting.
Yeah. Because mystery writers get a little twisted.
Oh, yeah. And what started your first book? I mean, the first book came out in 2021. And how, when, why did you decide to write cozy mysteries?
Well, I just wrote it and then I kind of figured out where it fit. But this was the first story, which was Rinse and Repeat, was actually a short story.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of early writers can kind of identify with this, is you'll write a story and then you'll yada, yada, yada different spots. You're like, and then this happened, and you kind of speed through the parts that readers want to read. And I had them kind of jumping from place to place because I knew the way I wanted the mystery to go. And I was aiming for, I think I wrote it as like a 5,000 word short story. And I gave it to someone. They said, no, this is a novel. And you have to completely rewrite it. And I did. I completely rewrote it. And it was interesting because the parts that I yada, yada, yada were like the most interesting parts. And I had kind of just flown by them to get to my destinations. Yeah.
So you yourself felt a little bit as if you had rushed what happened. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I'm writing right now a series of short stories that are mass and law stories that are going to be a collection. And I realized when you have a goal and you're like, I want to write a 3,000 word short story. It's really, at least in my point of being a writer, it's not up to me. Like I start the story and I like to write into the dark. So it's, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's just, one sentence after the other and you kind of just write and the mystery kind of takes off as I'm writing it. So it's fun because I'm a participant in the mystery. I'm like, well, where is this going? Because I don't know who did it till the end. And then what I do is I put on my editor's hat after I've written it and go, okay, well, what am I missing? Because one of the big rules of mysteries that I've seen broken that frustrates people is you need to give them the tools that it's possible that they could have guessed it. You don't want to have you don't have a mystery where they're like, you want them to go, oh, wow, I should have seen it. It was all in front of me and I missed it. That's the best feeling. And you're like, oh, I thought it was this person or this person. I was between the two. That's the dream of a short story, or any kind of novel, actually, that's a mystery. But if you couldn't have guessed it and you're like, I'm completely shocked, then the writer has kind of let you down. And that's easy to do because you want them to be able to read the book again and go, okay, that's where the little hint was of this. And that was the hint for there. And that you can see them. And that makes the rereading more fun too.
And how difficult is it if you aim for 3,000 words and you start writing and the mystery and the story develops when you start writing? How to hit the target?
So what I often do is sometimes I have to just say this story is not going to be that short story. I got to write a new one. Yeah. A lot of people will do, they call them plantsers. They're kind of planners. One of the things they call people who write into the dark are pantsers. By the seat of your pants is kind of theory. And then there's planners. And then there's a middle ground, which is called the plantser. And a plantser is a person who is writing into the dark and they're like, okay, I'm here. I want to be here, but I have no idea how I get to these. And then so you still have the mystery of how, and then that does help form a better framework of the story. And I've done that too. So I'm not a one or the other. So sometimes I'm like, oh wait, I have a complete picture of how I want to get to this. I know. It's kind of like if you know you're going to a town nearby and you're like, oh, someone told me this is going to be a good road, or I've decided I want to go on this road because I just want to make sure I hit this restaurant on the way to this road. Well, that's more like a planter. You know where you don't know maybe where you're going for that Sunday drive, but you're definitely going to go by this one restaurant. So, it just depends on how the mood takes you or the muse,
And do you also have a sort of murder ball? Because some of our guests, Mari Hanna definitely has a whiteboard where she puts notes and so on for her novels. Do you also have something like that?
I do. It's actually behind me. If you can see the grid, I write my little notes.
Okay.
They're kind of ominous. If someone came in, they would be like, "Oh, what is she up to?" Yeah,
It's dangerous.
Yeah, it looks dangerous, but especially with my handwriting. But yeah, I do that. And sometimes I'll find like a podcast. You're talking about podcasts where there's an unusual poisoning, or there's an unusual murder. I'll kind of keep that in the back of my head. Sometimes I'll write it down and have no idea if I'm going to use it or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as a writer, or as a cozy mystery writer, or a mystery writer, do you have a role model?
You know what's funny? And she's not technically a cozy writer, but I've got to say, Janet Ivanovich is one of just a pleasure to read. And I'm not at her caliber, but I am, and I'm not maybe, you can't really imitate people you love, because then you'll just be a pale imitation. You have to be yourself, but you definitely can admire people. And I admire Janet Ivanovich. They're just fun. What I would love is a beach read. This is something that people can enjoy. They're waiting for their kids to finish soccer practice and they can read it there. And I mean, I'm looking for something that's just fun to read. If there's not a thing about mysteries, I think people like the puzzle. And I want to give the puzzle without the doom. A real murder is really horrifying and traumatic, and it's not something that people really enjoy, but the puzzle, I like the puzzle. Yep. So I kind of make it more fun and less gloom and doom.
Yeah, that's true. Even though your murders are a bit gruesome.
Yeah.
Just a
little bit.
A little bit, but that's fine. I mean, that's part of a murder or crime mystery.
Yeah.
So
Not that bad.
Yeah. No, not so bad. Definitely not. So since the teacup is not asking the question, I will have to ask the question about the tea crime. Because what is the tea crime, dear listeners? Yes, indeed. From the European point of view, the tea crime consists of filling a cup with water and putting it into the microwave and then putting in the tea bag. That would be the tea crime.
Oh.
So is that very common?
Yes.
Yes.
And I will tell you something, Americans really shouldn't do it. And I'll tell you why. It breaks your microwave. I broke out of silliness to not get a teapot. I have broken microwaves by steaming them. That steaming your it depends how much tea you drink. But if you drink tea all day, every day, you're constantly steaming your microwave, you'll break it. It's much better to have a kettle. But
electric kettle.
Electric kettle is much better.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And faster, I think.
And faster. Yeah.
And faster.
Definitely. And there's also, I mean, I'm the coffee drinker. And for medicine, coffee is, what did you call it?
It's a kind of medicine.
Kind of medicine, if it's caffeinated. Yeah. Are you the same?
I go through these phases of getting it out of my life and then bringing it back. And yeah, it's like jet fuel. It really is. Like, it's funny because you balance your energy. I do feel like caffeine is kind of stealing energy from a different time in your day, because you need it really badly now. And I do feel like any more than a cup, that's what you're doing. And for Madison, she's for whatever reason kind of cut caffeine out of her life. I think it's because of her anxiety. Because that's the one thing that people do. And I think she's done it because she's had such a traumatic couple of events in her life. So she cut it out, but she's ready to lean on it if she has to.
And where exactly did medicine come from? Where did she pop up? Did she pop up one day and say, "Hey, it's me, put me in the book"?
Yeah, she's actually that particular short story was supposed to be a teaser for a what we call a reader's magnet. To try to get people onto your website so that you have these people, you're trying to collect people so that when you put a book out, you're like, hey, look, I have this book. And, and also it's good to get people's opinions on your writing. And in this case, I wrote it as a magnet just for fun. And I actually have another series I haven't even started yet. That is really more of a cozy than this one. And she just kind of popped out of nowhere. And I thought it's fun because she's going to actually be kind of a colleague to my other character that I haven't even released those books yet.
Sounds intriguing. We have to come back to that.
And what I also find interesting there is that some of the side characters seem to be working part-time in the agency because they have a completely different life apart from that. Different things. It makes them quite interesting.
Will they get their own series then? Daphne, for example?
Yeah, I've thought about Daphne getting her own series. Yeah, and she's Daphne is very dedicated to her family farm that she kind of turned into an animal sanctuary, and that's what a lot of people have done in Florida is that they have these animal sanctuaries. A lot of times, especially in the Kissimmee area, people have livestock and they love them, and they almost, they're almost like family pets. And then somebody passes away. Now there's horses, there's cows, and maybe the family splits up the property, and they no longer want to do. Maybe the parents did it, and the kids have their professional lives and don't want to take care of them. So this happens where people's farm animals, get rehomed. That's quite a frequent thing.
And I also wanted to ask you, since we spoke about it a little bit before we started the recording, I wanted to ask you about the writing community, because you mentioned a few of our guests we had before. You know them. How did you come together, and how much of a support is it for you personally?
I can't even say how wonderful it is. It's especially for a new writer. There is a strange bump between being a amateur to being a professional. There's this kind of space in between, where you don't really know, there's a lot of, write a book in a month, write a book in a year kind of books that'll kind of talk you through how to format it, how to maybe even, put it in the proper format to get it put on Amazon, things like that. Those are the to-dos, but to actually be a writer is a different story, because I've never found like a college that will teach you, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to live your life this way. You need to have pockets of time, So the writers community is wonderful for that. There's just a lot of shorthand knowledge that you can get, where someone will say, oh, this will work for me. It might work for you. That cuts out a lot of wasted time. And then, I think part of it too is, as a beginning writer, you want someone to acknowledge that you are part of the community. And having a community where you have all these colleagues that are in different levels of their writing journey, and you go, okay, I am a writer. I've found my niche, and so wonderful. I can't tell you how great the community is, because it's very easy to think it would be a competitive environment, because so much of the world is. And I think that everybody, at least me, I see in every new writer's face my reflection. Because we're all passionate about the same things. I think every writer starts with just waking up in the middle of the night and typing. No reason, or writing in a notebook that no one's going to see. And it's like, it's like a doodler that's doodling on a napkin, and then they find themselves drawing. Well, maybe they're meant to be an artist. And to be in a community, it's such a rare thing to even find a lot of readers. I find. I think that few readers are reading all the books, because there are people like my grandmother, for example. She could read a book in a day. It didn't matter. She just would get into the world, and she would read it till it was done. And she read so many books, and I know so many people like that who read so much. So to think that we're in competition with each other, there is no way I could write enough books to satisfy her thirst for books. And so that's really how the writing community sees themselves. They see themselves as supporting each other. We're not in competition. And also, everybody's got their own taste. So, you're saying coffee drinker. There are people that are coffee drinkers are not going to want a special blend of tea. Nope. So depending on what your tastes are, there are a lot of people who wouldn't want to read my book. And that's okay, because I'm not their taste. And, maybe they're into military fiction, or maybe they're into sci-fi. That's great. Then that's your flavor. So there's enough room for everybody, despite what a lot of people say.
Yeah, that's true. Although you have this wonderful support from the writing community, from other writers, what would you say now, after having written those two novels? What are the greatest challenges?
The greatest challenge is, I don't remember who said this, but somebody said this, and I'm going to probably butcher it, but someone said that it's easier to run a city than to manage yourself. And I find that so funny. I wrote it in my notebook. And I feel like that is the hardest thing about being a writer, is that a lot of writers are in love with the world. I am so in love with the world. I find people fascinating. I find places fascinating. I'm the person that could go and, the kids that sit down and they read back in the day would read the encyclopedia from beginning to end, or the dictionary from beginning to end, for no reason. No one forced them. It was there. It was just there. And I think that's a lot of writers. And so we're in love with the world. It's hard to focus the love. And I can find myself, butterfly, that. And it happened to me yesterday. I was researching because I'm working on this short story collection, and I did some research. And next thing I know, an hour has gone by, and I'm on this site about things that are in Kissimmee. And I'm just going through the history of Kissimmee and reading all this wonderful information that has nothing to do with my book and nothing to do with my story, but I got distracted. So I think that's the most difficult thing, is keeping yourself on a schedule. I'm with a group of people. We write 500 words a day, at least. And that is a really good thing because, and it doesn't need to be 500 words. It could be 100 words. It could be whatever, but 500 words is about like a little paragraph or so. And what that does is it just keeps you in story, and I feel like even if you're moving at very small, because, the holidays just passed and people have people at their house and you have these different family commitments. If you write you can write 500 words in a half an hour, even if, depending on how slow you are. Those are little stolen moments where you're, waiting for something to finish cooking and you're on the couch. Everybody's watching a movie you've seen 1,000 times. That's very easy to get those 500 words and to keep within the process. So I think that's the hardest thing is that. And I would say marketing is difficult because you want to write and then you have to say, okay, now my writing time to stop. Someone had told me that you need to write 70% of the time and market 30% of the time. And that's a very difficult, because sometimes you're in between projects and you feel like you have nothing to market, but you have to kind of stay with your community and continue talking to them. And maybe that's a time to share what other people are doing and support your friends.
Yeah. Marketing. How hard was it during the pandemic for you? Because like I said, your first book came out in 2021. We were still in the middle, more or less, of it. How hard was that back then?
Were any bookshops open? Or was
in the
everything
United States?
Closed?
Yeah.
No, it was really, you had to be everything virtual. And the thing is, in a way, a lot of the virtual communities that I formed was because of the pandemic. And in a way, it connected me with people I would not have otherwise known. I have friends that are in Australia, and I have friends that are in Kansas. And, I'm a person that would go to local things, but there is a limit on local things because the expertise level, maybe you don't have enough, if you're trying to find people who are in your genre, which is difficult, it's very easy to go to. I was going to writers groups that I loved people and they were great writers, but they were military fiction. And I love military fiction, but maybe I'm not an expert in it. So what I was giving them as feedback maybe wasn't as productive as someone who read, exclusively that. And then they weren't so helpful when I wrote, say, a romance, or, they didn't have they had the structure of like, hey, this person disappears and never comes back in the story and you've left them hanging. I need more of this person. Those kind of things were helpful, but for like the enjoyment of the story, not so much.
You mentioned before about your editor's hat. How hard is that to change roles and become the editor of your own work? How hard was that for you, or how hard is that for you?
It's pretty easy once you realize that. What I try to do is I'll read 500 words of, I'll say I write 500 words or 1,000, depends on the session. I will loop back and reread it. And every time I loop back, sometimes like right now I have a short story that's 9,000 words long. So it's a long loop. loop back. But what I'm doing is when I read back, I'm also giving my subconscious time to sort all the clues that I've put together towards the end so that I can, oh, hey, I had this clue. I want to make sure I keep that in there. So that's my one way of editing because I want to make sure that it's spelled correctly. But those are really small edits. What I do is I give it to a trusted reader. That's my first editor. I mean, after I make sure that things are spelled right, commas are in the right place, those simple things, I give it to a trusted reader and she'll read it and say pretty honest feedback. She's a big reader in the genre and she'll be like, this didn't ring true to me. And then that's something where you're like, oh yeah, I've got to fix that.
Okay. And I've mentioned it before. I said we will come back to that. So tell us a little bit about your plans, about your other series. What's coming next from you, Natalie?
Well, so my next book is actually going to be called Cold Turkey, and it's another Madison Law book. And then, so I'm going to do 3 stories, and then I'm starting a Coco Isle series, which is going to be about a writer who finds herself in Coco Isle, which is Cocoa Beach, and she has to solve a murder of a colleague, and she's a mystery writer, so she doesn't really have the tools for the real. And and it's a very small town, so there's very quirky characters, and so that one is I'm not sure when that's gonna come out.
Yeah, okay.
Pounding on the door.
Yeah. The supervisors are here.
The supervisor, she's like, what's going on? But that's my next series, and that one is The Tomato Killers is the name of that one. And so that one will be hopefully out sometime in the summer. I'm hoping.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Just drop us a line then.
And it reminds me, as I mentioned, Angela Lansbury. Yep. In a certain TV series.
Yeah. I love Angela Lansbury. I love the Merge She Wrote series. I think that was a fun time.
And also, like all the other guests we have on our show, what would be your advice for any other author, be it mystery writer or any other genre?
I would say that it's very important to believe in yourself so much you're not asking for permission. And I feel that I wasted a lot of time asking for permission to be a writer and saying, am I good enough to be in the group? Am I good enough? Know that you're good enough because we're all storytellers. We were born storytellers. I mean, since we all, sat around the campfires and told stories, we're all storytellers. I think that everybody's capable. I think everybody has a story in them, whether they want to. That's not everybody wants to sit down and type out a 50,000 word novel, but everybody could. I really do believe that it's just as much as anyone can pick up a paintbrush. Anyone can pick up, it doesn't mean that you'll sell 1 million copies, probably not. But the passion of doing it and have a book on the shelf or a painting that you could hang on a wall. I think that everybody is capable of that. And I think we're all artists. And that's a kind of a part of people that has lying kind of dormant. A lot of people because of time, maybe.
Would you also say that in recent years there has been a lot of change in the publishing industry? It has become easier for aspiring authors to get a book out, to get it published?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of gatekeepers before. I think there was a lot of, the idea of even sending my book to a slush pile where it would be in some mailroom for the foreseeable future until somebody luckily, liked the first page is terrifying. And I think it keeps a lot of people, I think that kept a lot of people from writing is the reality of how hard it would be. And then the flip side of that is that independent writers kind of fight the stigma of having 10,000 copies in their garage. Because back in the day, if you wanted to have your book published, you had to basically be your own publisher, publish 10,000 of your books, hope they didn't rot in your garage before you sold them. And it was such a commitment. And now we have it's wonderful, print on demand is a wonderful thing. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, basically you put your book out and a person can buy the book and it's printed right there. So that book, so if you only sell 4 copies, then only 4 books have been printed, which is also better for the environment. There's a lot of, unfortunately, because publishing, there's a lot of books. If you ever go to any of the discount stores, we have dollar stores here. I don't know if you guys have them there. But I'll find a glut of extra books from really good writers. But, there's only so much shelf space. And what they do is every time there's a book put on a shelf, there's a timestamp on it. And when it has not sold fast enough, it moves on to discount chains and lower and lower and lower until it's, at, say, dollar stores being sold for $1. And there are great books to be found there. Like, this is a great book. It just maybe too many of them.
The changes, it's interesting what happened over the years. Like you said, it has become easier for independent authors to publish their books. What I found interesting is also that we have this book fair in Austria, in Vienna. And this time at the book fair, there were also independent authors and independent also publishers invited for the book fair, and also people who publish with Kindle or Amazon. And they realized that it's a huge market and it has become interesting also for the audience. Do you think that maybe the traditional publishing houses should broaden their horizon a little bit?
I don't know. I would hate to say what I think they should do for their business, since I'm not really in that business. But I think that it would be interesting if they did actually get into that space, because it would be neat to have. I think the more people that are in the space of printing on demand, that actually is just a win-win for everybody. And I think I read somewhere that the average book sells no more than 100 copies. And to think of the environmental waste of that many books, and my family, we buy a book, I'll give it to my mother, she'll give it to my sister, she'll give it to my other sister, my husband will read it. And this book has gone through so many hands. And then eventually, when I've seen it too many times, I'll take it to thrift store. So it's got a lifespan. And I think that's how a lot of books are. That have been purchased, but the ones that were never owned, it's almost sacrilege. I feel bad for those little old orphan books that never were loved. They never had their pages creased, never had a coffee stain on them. It's such a shame. What a waste.
I think it would be nice as a reader to use print on demand for out of print books.
Yes.
Because often you look for a book and it says and it's not available. And sometimes you can find them for horrendous prices. You're not prepared to pay, but...
Well, I find that the intellectual property biz is such a sticky situation, because what you'll find out is that when you look into those books, because I have some books from childhood that I love that were like, say, chapter books, and I've got like a list of books I would love to find that will never be reprinted, because what's happened is the author had a business arrangement with a company, and unfortunately a lot of these publishing houses either folded or they've actually kind of folded into another company and then maybe split. So now there's 2 different companies. Which half do they own? So in the end, I think everything comes down to who's getting paid, because they want to make sure if they're going to make money off this book, the author needs to get paid. The company that was brave enough to put it to print to begin with, who might have lost money on it, they need the money. And what a sticky mess. I don't know how to, that Gorgon and Knot, I don't know how to sort that out of who gets what. Yeah. If they could figure out an easy way, the second they figure out how to give, who gives what to those situations, they'll be repented. I guarantee it. Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. Because there's a lot of treasures out there that are crumbling books, and it's a shame.
Exactly. Coming back to a sticky situation, you put your characters in sticky situations quite often in your book.
Also because of the weather?
Oh, yes. Also because of the weather, indeed. And I wanted to ask you if you would ever write a book, let's say, a mystery in the past, or maybe even put it in the future?
Well, that would be neat. I mean, there's so many good authors that do that. The great thing about writing in the past, which is, some like a gritty, hard-boiled mystery. I would love to write one of those. Like kind of like one of the pulp books. I think that would be fun because I don't know if you've ever read any of the Reacher books. Those are a different kind of mystery.
By Lee Child, you mean?
By Lee Child, yes. And what's interesting is he's not a big tech guy, which is great because he has to, instead of something he could find on the internet, he has to go track it down. So in a lot of ways, he kind of bent the rules by making him a kind of a technophobe, which was what a genius idea. So in a way, what he did was he took someone who's like present day and made them kind of a hard-boiled detective.
Yeah.
I think it would be tricky to do that myself in a way. I would really probably have to do a time warp and write like a different time, but I think it would be fun. I would love to do it.
And what about the future?
Oh, the future. I don't know. I think about what was it? The Philip K. Dick who did the oh gosh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. But the Electric Sleep.
Androids.
Dream. Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. I love these blends. I'm so excited when people take two different genres and they mix them together. Like I love Jim Butcher. He's a great, he writes like, I don't know if you're familiar with any of his books, but they're great fun. He writes a series about
I think a friend of ours mentioned him. It's a sci-fi kind of.
It's kind of like a fantasy magic. It's got magic in it, a paranormal.
Yeah,
it's paranormal mystery. Yeah. It's a paranormal mystery, and it's urban paranormal mystery. Because what he's blended, it's all in Chicago, and he's a wizard, and his name is Harry. And I've read all the books. The last one was out a couple of years ago, but I think he read like 22 books. So it's all set in Chicago, and he's got to deal with the crime. There's like a crime family that's doing business with vampires, and there's fairies, and there's wizards, and there's all these cool blends of things all centered in Chicago. And it's fascinating, and it's all present day. And I love it. I love when people blend things. It opens a lot of doors of the imagination.
Yeah. I mean, you have more freedom.
And you can invent whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love it. Yeah, there's so many geniuses doing that. I think it's fun. Yeah, I like to bend genres. I think it's fun to do that and mix them.
Maybe something to think about for the future.
Oh yeah.
So, Natalie, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know? Anything else you would like to share?
Let's see. Well, I will say that I have a short story collection coming out, and I'm trying to. Well, let's see. I don't know if I don't want to announce it yet because it's still in the infancy. But I do have. I think Cold Turkey will be coming out in June, and that is actually going to have a turkey in it. So I grew up around turkeys. And we had turkeys in our backyard. It was very funny. My mom felt bad for this one sick bird. So she started feeding them bird seed and corn. And then it was so funny because we lived in the woods, and we had these just different groups of birds that would come. And they always came at 4:00 because she fed them. And so if anybody knows turkeys, they're quite little characters.
Not just cats are characters.
Yeah.
And we also heard about emus. Emus have been a thing, haven't we learned that? Yes, in this one, when was it? 80s or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, and I have llamas in the Dollars to Donuts to Dead. Yeah, I like llamas. And actually, we had emus in my backyard. I love animals, and they've all got their little personalities. I mean, I'm not one of those people who necessarily. I try not to humanize them. They're animals, and they deserve to be animals and enjoy being animals. Yeah, I don't want to dress them up in outfits too much, But I appreciate what other people do. My husband's so terrified I'm going to put my cats in like little tutus and stuff because I'll look at it and I'll be like, that's so cute. I've kept myself from doing it, but I understand the compulsion because I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's what Photoshop's for.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Right.
So
Yes. No cats were harmed in this picture.
Yeah. And this begs also the question, will there ever be a cat detective in any of your short stories or books, maybe?
Well, it'd be funny because my cat is so disinterested in anything. I don't know if she could really solve any mysteries. I think she'd just be like, it's fine. If somebody gets murdered, she's like, is there going to be someone that's going to give me food? Okay. But just get him out of here and I'm fine. I mean, she's and she loves, we have workmen come in from time to time and she just falls at their feet. She's like, I love you. Are you the plumber? You're wonderful. Take me away from these terrible people. And I'm just like Ripley, why are you she's such a traitor. She's like, I love you. And then the guy's like, oh yeah, I'm a cat fan. He's picking her up and petting her and stuff. And,
I love you now. Open my food.
I love you now. Yes. Especially because I think you have a sandwich in there somewhere that you can share.
So we might learn a little bit more about medicines, Ripley, then in the future.
Oh, you learn more about Ripley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Medicines Ripley. Okay.
Yeah. She's gonna be in every story pretty much because she's kind of her. In every mystery, there's someone that people talk to, and she doesn't really have a person that lives with her, so she's gonna rely on Ripley's good counsel.
Indeed, a sounding board.
Yeah, it's good to have a sounding board.
It's either
even just to hear yourself talk.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's either Rick or Ripley. Yep. Good to know. Yep. You're fine. Okay. No more questions. So thank you, Natalie. It was a pleasure talking to you. It was great fun. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday.
Oh, yes. Anytime. It's wonderful.
You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.